Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Environment and Sustainable Development Committee. We are doing a bit of a special meeting today. We'd had a motion that our committee agreed to a couple of weeks ago, and the motion is that the committee have a meeting with witnesses to discuss disaster mitigation and insurance in relation to severe flooding, wildfires, and other extreme weather events in Canada. And so for our first panel today, we have two panels, one now and then one that will come on at 4:30. So first from Forests Ontario, we have Rob Keane. Second, we have the Kinte Conservation, Bradley McNevin. And lastly, Forest Products Association of Canada, Kate Lindsay. So welcome to the three witnesses. We have 10 minutes scheduled for each of your opening statements. And just so you know, I use a card system, so at the when there's 1 minute left, I'll give the yellow card. That's just to give a sense of timing. And then when your time is up, we have a red card. That simply flags that wind it up, but don't stop mid-sentence. And once we have the three opening statements, we'll go to rounds of questions. Our questions are 6 minutes each, and so we go from the government side to opposition to second opposition, and we'll see just how many rounds of questions we can get in before we get to 4:30 when we need to reset for the next panel. So with that, who would like to start? Maybe Kate, do you want to start, and Ms. Lindsay, and I'll give you 10 minutes for your opening statements.
Great. You can hear me all right?
We're good.
Great. All right, good afternoon, and thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kate Lindsay. I'm the VP of Sustainability. I'm pleased to be here to represent the Forest Products Association of Canada as part of your study on disaster mitigation and to provide context on the role of forest management in supporting disaster mitigation and adaptation in the face of climate change. FPAC provides a voice for Canada's wood, pulp, and paper producers nationally and internationally in government, trade, and environmental affairs. Let me give you a quick snapshot of how important the forest products sector is to Canada's economy. It is a $69 billion a year industry that represents 2% of Canada's GDP. The industry is one of Canada's largest employers, operating in 600 communities coast to coast, forest-dependent communities. We directly employ about 230,000 people across Canada. The sector is also important when it comes to the Canadian environment. As custodians of almost 10% of the world's forests, we take our responsibilities as environmental stewards very seriously. Canada has the most independently certified forests in the world, 166 million hectares, or about 43% of all the certified forests. In fact, repeated surveys of international customers have shown that Canada has the best environmental reputation in the world. Climate change is emerging as a signature issue of our time. To respond to that, the forest product companies have been ahead of the curve by aggressively reducing their carbon footprint and running more efficient facilities. In fact, pulp and paper mills have cut greenhouse gas emissions by an impressive 66% since 1990, an equivalent of 9 megatons of CO2 per year. The sector does not use coal and barely any oil, less than 1%, and we now have more than 30 facilities that generate green electricity from biomass residues at the mill sites. Following Canada's commitment under the Paris Agreement, the forest products industry pledged in May 2016 to remove 30 megatons a year of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That's about 13% of the government's emission reductions target. We called this initiative the 30 by 30 Climate Change Challenge, and we're proud to be part of the solution. The effects of climate change have had and will continue to have an impact on our sector. Whether negative impacts such as forest fires and insect outbreaks, or positive such as accelerating the transformation of the sector to produce value-added bioproducts, today I would like to focus my comments on the management of our forests to both mitigate climate change and build resiliency and help mitigate disasters such as wildfire and flooding. Canada's forests are truly an astonishing resource. They represent 348 million hectares of forest land. The forest absorbs a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide, and by doing so, helps regulate the world's climate systems. We are continually looking to support and enable the forest sector to optimize carbon absorption. In some areas of Canada, this will include more active management of forests to sequester carbon, harvest the wood, which locks in carbon, renew the forest so the cycle can repeat itself. In each forest or forest region, Careful planning ensures features such as wetlands, riparian areas are maintained and managed to allow these features to further enhance carbon mitigation, but also to help with flood attenuation and protect drinking water. At the very same time, the forest industry is utilizing the products from this renewable resource over the working landscape to transition to a low carbon economy with innovative products such as bioplastics, biofuel, and tall wood buildings to displace more carbon intensive products. To further enhance the carbon sequestration of natural infrastructure, such as wetlands, peatlands, and watersheds, we have a long-standing relationship with academics, such as the Saskatchewan Research Council, and partners, such as Ducks Unlimited Canada. We have been working with these partners to quantify the carbon sequestered and to codify forest management practices that conserve and enhance these features in providing carbon sequestration, as well as the many ecosystem services. As per the component of your study on the role of nature and natural spaces in mitigating disaster, I would also like to highlight a significant potential unintended consequence of the preservation of nature. As you can appreciate, there is a variety of ecosystems across Canada. Much of the forested area in Canada falls within disturbance-driven ecosystems. This is primarily wildfire, but also forest pest and wind blowdown. Thus, these ecosystems have naturally had stand-replacing fires across much of the forested landscape through history. In more recent history, scientists believe our forests are under greater stress, such as drought and disease, likely due to climate change. And this has resulted in more catastrophic fires, such as the fires in British Columbia in 2017 and 2018. Due to fire suppression and forest preservation in the form of protected areas and conserved areas, there are also more forests that are older and denser, producing more fuel for the forest pests and fires. Compound that with the expansion of towns, cities, and infrastructure, and this is a growing challenge for communities' safety. This area, known as the wildland-urban interface, will require new and different approaches to management and emergency preparedness. I would like to highlight one example that illustrates some of the proactive work needed to help mitigate fire disasters. In Jasper National Park, located in west central Alberta, it's an iconic natural space and managed by Parks Canada. For many years now, Parks Canada and the town of Jasper have had growing concerns about fire safety. Since 2003, Parks Canada has been managing fuel by implementing a Fire Smart plan, for the most part utilizing tree removal and prescribed burns. But the plan was no longer addressing the scale of the risk. Mountain pine beetle moved into the park, with significant damage in 2017 and 2018. The community was asking for further action. And in March 2018, Canfor, a forestry company located locally in Alberta, won a bid to use large-scale forest management to create a fire break above the town of Jasper within the park. It was an unlikely partnership, but over the last year, the project involved careful planning and the harvesting of over 300 hectares of forests. As a result of this work, the project is nearing, or as of this week, the project is nearing completion, and the objectives have been met. The harvest has significantly reduced the fuel loading to mitigate for fire for the town residents and park visitors, but also the ecological values such as maintenance to soil and wildlife habitat quality have been met. This is just one example of where the creation of natural spaces such as parks and set-asides have to be considered carefully, and or which management treatments may be required to mitigate fire and flooding risk in those areas and the adjacent communities. There are existing broader tools that can be used, such as Fire Smart at the community level, vulnerability assessments at the forest management unit or regional level, and we encourage governments to look at expanding and supporting these approaches. We believe there is a responsibility and role for professional foresters to support community safety and stability, and we encourage a national dialogue on addressing innovative ways and investments to address wildfire risks in the future. Thank you for your attention this afternoon, and I would be happy to address any of your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for those opening comments. We'll jump right now to Mr. McNevin for your opening 10-minute statement.
Thank you for the thank you for the opportunity to address the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development regarding the study of disaster mitigation and insurance. First off, I'd like to formally introduce myself. As mentioned in the introduction, I am Brad McNevin, Chief Administrative Officer with Quinte Conservation. I've been employed in the environmental sector for the past 20 years, working with Fisheries and Oceans Canada, private environmental and engineering consulting firms, and currently with Quinte Conservation for the past 15 years. Quinte Conservation is one of 36 conservation authorities across the province of Ontario, and the only province to have these great organizations. Conservation authorities began to be established in the 1940s in order to address severe flooding and erosion problems. The most severe flooding on record in Ontario occurred in October 1954 when Hurricane Hazel passed through southern Ontario. 81 people died and damages were estimated at $180 million. Following the devastating impact of Hurricane Hazel, a flood forecasting and warning system was established in the province of Ontario. Several flood control facilities were significantly upgraded and constructed. Operational practices were designed to respond immediately to changing conditions, and regulations were put into place to limit and control future development and inappropriate land use activities in flood hazard areas. So I sit here today when many places throughout Ontario and other provinces have recently gone through significant flooding within the last month or so. And in my own region, we are still experiencing the Bay of Quinte and Lake Ontario surpassing their historic high water level established a mere 2 years ago in 2017. In contrast, the Quinte Conservation Region experienced a significant drought in 2016. It impacted many user groups, not just rural residents with dry wells. In fact, 100% of the Quinte Conservation Region was impacted in some way. Drought conditions observed in our lakes and rivers impacted fish and wildlife. Our agricultural community experienced hardship trying to keep livestock and crops watered, which resulted in financial impacts. Homeowners were hit with costs associated with purchasing bulk water to keep their households running. Municipalities had to implement bylaws for restricting water use. Extreme and unpredictable weather events are frequently occurring throughout the globe, and there is no doubt that it is prevalent throughout our region and our watersheds. These extreme and unpredictable weather events can be related to disasters in the form of impacts to our forests, lakes, rivers, wetlands, fish and wildlife, and also, as many people experienced recently, property destruction. We can build resilience to a changing climate through proper planning and adaptation. Quinte Conservation developed a climate change strategy in 2016, recognizing the reality of extreme weather events related to flooding, drought, and an increase of intense rainfall. Several action items have been developed with the aim of meeting our goal in helping our watershed residents both adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change. Natural infrastructure has a pivotal role in preventing and mitigating impacts of extreme weather events. Collectively, conservation authorities own and protect 150,000 hectares of land, including forests, wetlands, areas of natural and scientific interest, recreational lands, natural heritage and cultural sites, as well as land for flood and erosion control. The forests, wetlands, moraines, grasslands, and other natural features and ecosystems found throughout Conservation Authority lands help to prevent and reduce the harmful impacts of climate change. They protect and improve water quality, reduce flooding, act as drinking water sources, increase biodiversity, and provide healthy habitats for a wide range of wildlife, fish, and birds. Conservation authorities play an important role in natural infrastructure protection, restoration, and management in Ontario. We see on a regular basis large-scale deforestation which takes away the natural ability for water to be absorbed, retained, and recharged slowly into the water budget. Protection measures are needed to help preserve forests. Forest cover allows for improved water quality and slows overland flow after extreme intense rainfall, and this in turn promotes infiltration into the groundwater. An increase in forest cover through properly funded tree planting programs like 50 Million Trees is an important part of disaster mitigation. We have many partners, including municipalities and the private sector, and collectively plant close to 2.5 million trees per year and partner with Ducks Unlimited Canada and alternate land use service programs to restore wetlands and other natural features. There is a strong need to enhance and strengthen protection measures for all watercourses, wetlands, and headwater drainage features. Wetlands provide benefits during drought and flood events. They store water, recharge groundwater, allow sediments to deposit, and provide important habitat for fish and wildlife. They help to slow water flow, improve water quality, and sequester carbon. Urban watercourses in many areas consist of historically constructed concrete channels where water flow is restricted and encouraged to flow as fast as possible. One step in flood mitigation can be addressed by allowing watercourses to use their natural floodplains, overflow their banks, and slowly allow the water to move through the system. Some areas that have already been urbanized will be difficult to mitigate. We need to encourage all levels of government to put high priority on reviewing development applications so that development is in the right location. Floodplains and wetlands are not the place to allow development. Conservation authorities support green infrastructure and low-impact development initiatives. We take a watershed management approach to planning and developing strategies for restoration and management. Disaster mitigation should include recovery programs where if homes are in floodplain areas, the government should require floodproofing as a condition of funding. The government, or where possible, rather than building on the same footprint, homes should be moved away from the current and future predicted flood risks. Programs should consider relocation funding rather than rebuilding. Investing in floodplain mapping and increasing the coverage of floodplain mapping will help with disaster mitigation and prevention. Some of the floodplain mapping at Quinte Conservation is from the 1970s. There have been significant changes in infrastructure and land use, and this impacts accuracy of existing mapping. In our region of Ontario, many watercourses do not have floodplain mapping. We require accurate and up-to-date floodplain mapping to guide in decision-making during development reviews. Floodplain mapping needs to include flood scenarios to assist with emergency responses to public safety. For example, if a known area is susceptible to flooding and we have details regarding what flood levels occur at specific flow events, emergency responders will have the tools and information required to know where to direct resources. Investing in more real-time models to better track specific events and see how storms will affect floodplains and the surrounding landscape. Invest in improvements to the existing precipitation, snow depth, and flow monitoring networks. In a flood event, precipitation is typically the most unknown quantity and has the largest impact on flooding. Precipitation is the driver of flood events, so let's build a better network to monitor quantities. Environment and Climate Change Canada is doing a good job with rating curves, which are basically the relationship between water height and flow. However, we need to continue to improve the accuracy and expand the monitoring network. Although dams and infrastructure are not necessarily natural, they play a very important role in disaster mitigation. Investing in flood control and water management structures provides value during extreme events by capturing runoff and controlling the release when appropriate to reduce timing of peak flows. They also are important in reducing the impacts of drought when properly operated. However, reservoirs at these structures are limited to specific capacities and cannot be expected to be the only answer. Dams have substantial public safety and operational risks and liability. Many structures need significant investment to avoid potential worse flooding and drought impacts. In the Quinte region alone, we have 42 water management structures that require significant investment for major and minor and preventative maintenance. As we explore options for these structures, consideration will be given to decommissioning and refurbishing to a natural dam design to allow for less financial needs in the future. In summary, we know that climate change is directly impacting our weather and our communities. There is no time better than the present to start taking the necessary precautions in preparing for these impacts and ensuring that our country is prepared for the future. We need to promote forest preservation, support tree planting programs, enhance and strengthen protection measures for watercourses, wetlands, and headwater drainage features. We need to ensure that development is located in the right place, not in floodplains and wetlands. The natural environment has built-in mechanisms to mitigate extreme weather. We need to allow these features to function properly. Allow intense rainfall to flow into the natural floodplains of lakes, rivers, and wetlands. Urban stormwater management facilities can help, but protection of wetlands and floodplains is a better solution. We need to invest in enhanced and expanded floodplain mapping coverage, continue to invest and improve real-time models to track storm events, continue to invest in improvements to precipitation, snow depth event, and continue to invest in improvements to precipitation, snow depth, and flow monitoring networks. Canada needs to be a leader in addressing the impacts of severe weather events. This committee is tasked with an important focus that cannot be ignored.
Appreciated. Mr. Keane, we'll go over to you for your 10-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to be here today, and as the hazard to be in the third speaker, a lot of good comments have already been stated, so I'll try to avoid stating those yet again, and hit a few of the high points. I think one of the things I'm hoping that you heard was the importance of ensuring that natural infrastructure, and there is certainly, in particular in Southern Ontario, a lot of threats to our natural infrastructure, to our wetlands, to our grasslands, and certainly to our forests. Certainly here in Southern Ontario, we see development pressures, agricultural pressures constantly impeding on those natural infrastructures. And as a result, I think we have seen an increase in the flooding in this particular area. I think one thing to note of interest is the flooding situation is not new to Ontario, and in fact, some 100 years ago, flooding was a rather natural occurrence. Not natural, it occurred because of the heavy deforestation that occurred throughout Southern Ontario, stripping the lands of forests, trees, and certainly thereupon we saw an increased amount of flooding going on through much of Southern Ontario. There was a fellow by the name of Zavitz, forester, more than a decade ago, that recognized that the solution to this was to plant trees. And so he started planting trees, well over 1 billion, throughout Southern Ontario to address the flooding situation. And today you see throughout the moraines, a lot of the sand flats that used to be there are now treed, moving into a natural forest. And so it's worked, and it has sustained and reduced the amount of flooding that did occur back in that period. But we're seeing it again, and we're again with the constant influx of development. We're seeing areas stripped away. I saw in Eastern Ontario 600 acres of forest that was stripped for agricultural purposes. This is not sustainable, and unfortunately these types of cash crops have a long-lasting impact on our natural environment. And so there needs to be some incentives created to encourage landowners to keep trees on their property and or establish more trees on their property. And we certainly have in Ontario programs like the Managed Forest Tax Incentive Program, the Conservation Land Tax Program, that reduces the taxes that landowners have to pay for those properties. And we also, we had a program called the 50 Million Tree Program, which reduced the landowner's cost to plant trees on their property. And from my perspective, if we as a society expect landowners to provide their lands to put trees on their property, creating that societal benefit, we need to encourage them to do so, and that's by reducing the cost for the landowner. So these are the kind of programs that are essential to making sure that we have that natural infrastructure in the future. I think we recognize that with wildfires, and Kate touched on this quite well, we see an increase in wildfires. Just to speak to that briefly, what can happen with that, and I think there's been an increase in wildfires primarily because of the increase in drought, and as well, we as a society have tried to fight fires for decades and decades, putting out relatively small fires, where what's happened now is they get a certain situation where you've got drought, you've got high winds, you've got an incredible fuel load, and now these fires are so, call it the perfect storm, we can't put them out. And so we see fires like Parry Sound 33 that burnt. It was well over 11,000 hectares of fire. There was a fire up in Temagami. It was about 33,000 hectares. And you need to realize that these fires, although fires are a natural phenomenon in our ecosystems, and there's a lot of forests that depend on fire, these fires are far more severe than natural ground burning type fires. And because of that, they're scorching the soils. They're increasing the amount of erosion that will occur post-fire. And so we as a society, I think, it's incumbent upon us to get in there and do something to get those forests established back on that land. So there's various aspects of this that we need to look at. I think as I started to speak to originally with my comments, that in a large part of this, trees are the answer. We've known that trees provide incredible benefits for the society, both from sequestering carbon, as Kate mentioned, not just reducing carbon emissions, but actually sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere, to all the other values that they provide. And I think it's just incumbent upon us to look towards methods and means to ensure that we keep those forests on our landscape. Certainly with forest management, utilizing the wood products that come out of our sustainably managed forests. As Kate mentioned, again, we have the best managed forests in the world here in Canada and certainly in Ontario. And we should all recognize and be very proud of that. But we also need at the same time to realize that using wood products sustainably managed is good for the environment. And so we should be making sure that we promote that at every time and opportunity we can. So that would be my comments for this morning. I did try to, or this afternoon, I guess. I did try to keep them brief because there has been some very good statements made already, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all three of you for those very thoughtful and thought-provoking opening comments. I look forward to some great conversation. I did want to welcome Mr. Shipley to our committee. Good to see you back here. And we'll start off with Mr. Bosio. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that great presentations. It's great to have you in here today for this very important discussion. I guess first off, I'd like to start with Brad. Great to see you again. Say a couple of weeks ago for a great announcement, at the Quinte Conservation, and it was for an investment that's being made, a $250,000 federal investment into drought management to help better understand and manage and monitor the situations that we experienced in 2016. Maybe you can give us a description of why this is so important, especially today with the advent of climate change and trying to find ways to adapt and mitigate.
Yeah, that funding is very important. Our Conservation Authority is represented by 18 municipalities, and this funding is going to help prepare drought management plans for all 18 of those municipalities to have them better prepared. We're in a situation where the Quinte region has, I'll say a limited supply of groundwater. There's a lot of fractured bedrock, so it is really dependent in most regions in terms of sustained rainfall to recharge groundwater. So this funding will allow us to look closely at each of our municipalities and help them be prepared for the next drought that will be impacting our local residents. We'll look at individual landowners in certain perspective, but the plan is more developed on a municipal basis. But we'll be talking to landowners, forming some steering committees, and really reaching out to the public to engage them in the process.
Well, I mean, and the vast majority of people who live in our region in Hastings County rely on wells for their water. So it's vitally important in a region like ours that has a vulnerable aquifer to have both a drought and a flood management capability, because when we have floods, of course, those wells also become contaminated. So they get dry in under one condition, and then they become contaminated in other conditions. So thank you very much for the really important work that you guys do at Quinte Conservation, and helping us to better understand and how we can adapt to the changing conditions that we're faced with. I'd like to go to Rob now. Rob, you talked about the impacts of trees, and actually I want to read a quote because it's a really powerful quote that you had said. And we need trees to realize that to have a healthy economy and a healthy society, we need healthy forests. To have healthy forests for our future, we need to plant more trees. To date, the 50 million tree program has planted 27 million trees, so you're more than halfway there. Our 15,000 hectares of new forests on average. This means that every year the program has planted 2.5 million trees on approximately 4,000 properties. And according to the Environment Commissioner report, average forest cover in Southern Ontario stands at around 26%, with some areas seeing as low as 5% of forest cover. And the report identified that 30% of lands needs to be planted with trees to restore the forest cover in southern Ontario's optimal levels, equates to 680,000 hectares. So just how devastating is the cut of this program, I guess you've talked a little bit about the not planting them and the problem of a lack of forest. Maybe you could expand on that.
Sure. So just to add a little bit more to the percentages you were providing, it was a report actually that the Environment Canada put out a few years ago called "How Much Habitat Is Enough," and it's actually the third edition now that speaks to needing at least 40% forest cover in order for the forest to sustain itself in a healthy manner. So if you get anything less than that, and the forest, as particular when we see climate change advancing, it will feel the effects of the climate change. It won't be able to adapt as readily to climate change. So you need to have that large, healthy, contiguous, diverse forest in order to adapt as we see climate change progressing. So with regards to the cancellation of the $50 million program, yeah, it's quite devastating. It was the largest afforestation tree planting program in Ontario, and just to qualify afforestation from reforestation, the forest industry is required under law, under the Crown Forest Sustainability Act, to plant any areas that they harvest, regenerate any areas that they harvest. Part of that could be due to planting. With the work that we're doing, so that's Crown lands as part of the forest industry, it's just regular business, and they'll plant 60 to maybe 80 million trees per year in Northern Ontario on Crown public lands in order to fulfill their legal agreements. The areas that we're planting is afforestation, which is essentially establishing new forest cover. So these are on areas that are abandoned agricultural fields or some municipal lands that traditionally haven't had forests on them. And so we're creating new forest cover with this program. So certainly with the loss of the $50 million program, there is no other program that services large-scale tree planting to the tune of 2.5 million to 3 million trees per year for Southern Ontario to regenerate these areas to try to get that forest cover up to 40%. So it's extremely devastating.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
We're going to go over next to Monsieur Gaudin.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming today. I think here at the committee, we want to know what we can do in order to mitigate natural disasters. We know that climate change is happening, and we would be blind not to see it and not to realize it. So your presence is important for us to do our job correctly. I start with questions for Mrs. Lindsay. So you painted a pretty picture of Canadian forests. You demonstrated that Canada has done a lot in the past to protect its forests. And given the fact that you said you have some solutions like biofuel, bioplastics, and another element that I didn't note down, what else could we do? Because we are leaders, but natural disasters still occur. So what more can we do as federal parliamentarians to protect our forests and to use forests? Because I think it's very important to use forests to protect our planet. What else can we do?
Great, thank you. That's an excellent question. Because I think there is a bit of a paradigm shift that needs to happen. And I completely support what Rob has mentioned about trees being the answer. I think having productive, working, healthy forests will do a lot to mitigate catastrophic fire and consequential flooding. Flooding is a bit more complicated. So what I would suggest is that given climate change, given that we are in these natural disturbance-driven ecosystems, what we learn from the past is not necessarily going to guide our future. And so if we're having hotter fires that are having a more serious burn, I think we need to look at a few things. So one is the vulnerability assessments. So this is something that NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, right now provides some funding for, and we would encourage them to expand that funding. So that is for provinces, forest management companies, regions, community managed forests to understand what are their vulnerabilities. It will be different in different regions. It may be drought, it may be wildfire, it may be pest outbreaks, depending on where you are. It may be a combination. And so and it's actually a Canadian Council of Forest Ministers mandate framework, CCFM, vulnerability assessments, and it walks an organization through, what are the steps? What are my vulnerabilities given climate change? And then what are my options to adapt to those and further mitigate them? And some of them are no regret options. Really, it's just the right thing to do. Some of them will require more money, more investment. Some of them may require policy changes. So for instance, some jurisdictions have a fairly prescribed set of what trees you can plant, where you can plant them. And perhaps we may say, well, let's plant some adapted seed stock that may come from a little bit further south that we weren't allowed to plant before, but we know that that particular seed tree is going to be adapted to the future climate. So it might be drought resistant, it might be pest resistant, etc. And I'm not talking genetically modified trees, I'm just talking about natural seed stock that's been adapted. So I think there's some excellent things that we can look at, and the federal government could be supportive to those. And then I also think we need to look at, the concept is called fire smart, but it needs to be, that's a community level. I think it needs to be expanded because some of those same principles may not apply at a much larger landscape. So for instance, when our forest managers go into a community forum to manage forests, particularly in British Columbia right now, communities are saying, and we'll say, well, we have to leave those forests because of visual quality constraints, or we have to leave these trees because of a deer winter range. And all of these are important values and constraints, what we call constraints on the landscape. But now the community is saying, well, actually, I'd prefer to mitigate the risk of wildfire. I don't want to have to evacuate my town. So can we look at going in there and thinning some of those forests and treating some of those forests? So then we have a better mitigation plan so we don't have a catastrophic fire come through. And some of that wood might be used, we might pull the residue out, the fuel out, and that can be used for a biofuel or a bioproduct. So I think there's lots of things that we can do, but it does require looking at things a little bit differently than we have in the past, and having an honest conversation about values, and having fire and flooding risk part of that analysis. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Lindsay. Je vais me dépêcher pour poser une dernière.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one last question before I run out of time. In 2008, we were aware of climate change. You had an initiative, and I didn't know the name of the company involved. In Jasper Park, there was an initiative held with Parks Canada, a pilot project. You mentioned in your introductory remarks that you achieved your objectives. What exactly were those objectives? And over how many years was this done in order to be able to measure your objectives?
It's still early, but the objective set out by Parks Canada was to mitigate the fire risk, but also a number of other values as far as wildlife habitat, soil, maintenance of soil, coarse woody debris, a lot of technical aspects. And so it was a very, I would say, an element of a logging operation that took extreme care. But so the objectives were met in the length of the contract to pull out the amount of wood, so diseased trees that would mitigate the risk for the town of Jasper, but also all the follow-ups, assessments and audits by Parks Canada and the regulators have shown, and the companies Canfor, that the operation was done in a way that met their objectives as far as maintenance of soil and habitat. So as far as mitigating long-term, I think we'll have to wait and see whether those fire breaks are in fact successful.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stetsky, you're next with 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. My riding is in southeastern British Columbia, a rural riding. I have over a dozen lumber mills in my area, and so I want to start with Ms. Lindsay, if I might. Some questions around the industry and planning for climate change. There's a lot of concern in my writings around logging and watersheds and concerns about potential landslides. There have been some, fortunately not a lot, but there's a lot of concern. And I'm wondering, is the industry working towards new standards to meet the challenges of climate change, heavier rainfalls, et cetera? So, for example, have you adjusted standards around steep slope logging and other potential landslide issues?
Great. Thank you. It's a good question, and it's something that the industry has been concerned with for some time. Even I worked in the industry about 15 years ago, and it was required to have a slope stability expert on staff to do the engineering layout. I would say in the face of climate change, though, it is something that needs to be further considered. In particular, the community where I'm from the west coast of Canada, because we are seeing precipitation events happening, what we call flashier systems. So less often, but more precipitation. And so can those systems withstand that water inundation? And so looking at how you design the culvert sizes, your roads, the layout of your block, et cetera, is extremely important. I will say that we have expertise through Forest Products Innovation, FPI, a group that's across Canada that is looking at the engineering innovation side and really looking to adaptation moving forward. I'll also say that it's what I encourage companies to do and regions to do is baseline studies. And so I think to the point raised by my colleague here is allowing some of those systems to use their natural floodplains and understanding what those are. So having some of those baseline assessments done will help determine whether in fact is that something that was naturally occurring, or is that something either because of climate change or because of certain developments happening in the watershed. So having a clearer sense of why those, if you have runoff or sediment or things like that, washouts. And then I'll also say that we're now finding, and we're involved in some research, University of Waterloo and Trent and others, to look at post-catastrophic fire. Those watersheds are not, like there's issues to clean drinking water. And so is there an opportunity for us to understand that dynamic system naturally, and then how we can conduct forest management so we actually mitigate risk of catastrophic fire and then flooding. So I think it's a good point. I think there's a lot of work being done, and I'm happy to follow up with specific changes that may have happened recently.
Yeah, it'd be nice at some point to see a climate change strategy or plan from forest industry in general in terms of what might need to be done differently to accommodate climate change moving forward. So related to that, when a fire happens currently in an annual allowable cut, what happens to the AAC for that particular area, and who's responsible for planting the trees in a fire-killed area, industry or government in the end?
Well, it's a good question. My understanding is if it's a certain amount in size, the obligation is the Crown. So it's the province that's required to reestablish those areas.
I understand we're getting a little behind in our reforestation, partly due to the amount of fire we're seeing.
Absolutely. And so I think something that the BC government in particular has created is the BC Forest Enhancement Society. And I know that forest companies, communities, and the province are working through that society to reestablish areas post-fire, post-beetle, to get, so similar to what Rob was mentioning, to get some of those areas reforested much faster and back on that trajectory.
Okay. Might come back to if I get another round. So, Mr. McNevin, you talked about the importance, and I absolutely agree with you. I was a mayor. I was also with the BC Ministry of Environment. that we need to try and restore natural cycles for water. How much cooperation are you getting from municipalities with that concept?
Well, locally, we have our partnerships with our municipalities are very good. We have some rivers, water courses that routinely flood, and we're working on mitigation measures to address those specific areas. But there is a lot of work to be done in terms of some of the smaller rivers and water courses that don't have floodplain mapping or inaccurate mapping. So I think getting municipalities to help address those concerns is going to be vitally important going forward.
It's going to be a lot of work for municipalities
Absolutely.
right across Canada. And Mr. Keene, just quickly, is there any funding currently for federal funding for trees?
Not currently, no.
No? Think there should be?
Absolutely. I think
Absolutely.
the more partners that are contributing, getting more trees in the ground is the better.
That takes you to the end of your minute. The next one we're going to go to is Mr. Fisher and Mr. Amos splitting their time. So I'm going to give them at the end of 2 minutes the card, and at the end of the first 3 minutes the red card, and then it can go to the next person. So Mr. Fisher, pay attention. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, folks. I'll go with Ms. Lindsay if I could. We know that Canada's forests can be altered by climate change, just as certain forestry practices can alter a forest's ability to mitigate climate change. Now in Nova Scotia, we have very little crown land, as most of it is privately owned. So that puts a lot of responsibility on woodlot owners and the governments who regulate them to practice good forestry management. Now, I recognize that there are many woodlot owners who positively and sustainably manage their land, but I'm interested in whether you would work with individual woodlot owners to teach these good practices that will allow our forests to serve as a potential means towards climate mitigation.
Yeah, so FPAC, we largely represent Crown managed forest companies in Canada. We do work with some of the woodlot associations as well. And I would say, so we are working on mainstreaming some of these mitigation adaptation practices. And from my perspective, regulatory context, so having forest management planning acts in provinces speak to mitigation adaptation opportunities is positive. But the other area is forest certification. So even woodlot owners or managers on private land subscribe to forest certification standards, and there's different standards based on the size of the area you manage. And so we've been working with a couple of those standards to advance some of the mitigation adaptation components into those indicators. And I think that's a way to have forest managers more aware of the opportunities before them, and then to have an auditing system to verify if in fact they are implementing those strategies. So.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Ramos. That's fine.
Thank you, Dare. Thank you to our witnesses. It's really fabulous to have you here. I want to jump in on what appears to me to be a sort of two levels of government going in totally different directions when it comes to increasing forest cover and increasing wetlands, etc. On the one hand, you have our government, which has invested historic sums, $1.3 billion over 5 years, in protected areas and protected spaces, and all different forms of, terrestrial and marine areas. And at the same time, our government has also, for the first time, opened to provincial governments through the bilateral infrastructure deals signed with each province, opened natural infrastructure as a category of available federal financing. So provincial governments that choose to open programs that enable natural infrastructure, they can receive federal financing for that. It's up to the provinces. I don't believe Ontario has gone this direction. I may be. I'd ask for your correction if I'm not on point. But on the other hand, we have an Ontario government provincially that is pulling out of the business of planting trees. So I'm seeing two different directions here, and I wonder if you could comment on the importance of both the federal government investing massively in conservation and investing massively in natural infrastructure, but also the importance of having a tag team effort and the fact that there's a real challenge when you have a provincial government going in the opposite direction. Maybe if we could start with Mr. Keene.
Sure. So certainly, I think the notion is that it can't be borne by just one government, one level of government. There needs to be multiple partners at the table to work towards this common direction of ensuring the natural infrastructure that I believe we're all trying to achieve. Certainly, with the direction of the current provincial government, that could be questionable just because they have canceled the 50 million tree program. They're canceling some other supporting mechanisms that speak to, nature, various endangered species, things like that. It seems to be under question. But I do think that, as I was noted earlier, that I think if we can all get our heads wrapped around the fact that we have to have a healthy environment in order to drive a healthy society and a healthy economy. And it can't be the other way around. It can't be, all focus on the economy and we'll worry about the environment later. And I think that has tended to be the way things have been for a long time. And I think hopefully now we can start to recognize that no, we have to start with that healthy environment first. Mm-hmm. And again, governments need to be part of this. I see corporations being part of this too through corporate social responsibility, and certainly the public. They can, and individuals can contribute themselves to all of us working together to ensure that we have that healthy environment for the future.
Thank you. Mr. McNevin, with the brief time that there is left, would you mind commenting on that?
I agree that all levels of government, we need support from Conservation Authority perspective. The provincial government is looking at the Conservation Authorities Act in terms of reviewing it to look at the way that it's administered, and it's very vitally important for conservation authorities that the Conservation Authorities Act is represented to allow us to properly review development proposals and implement the measures within the Conservation Authorities Act for the betterment of the environment, for the betterment of our environments, and protect people from effects of flooding and disasters.
Thank you.
So I think there's time for a 3-minute round, Mr. Fast, if you want to take that, and then we'll suspend this session, reset, and get the next group going.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for appearing here. I noticed my colleague over here, Mr. Amos, tried to draw you into a political comment. I'm not going to do that. I think this is too important to politicize. I'd like to talk a little bit about the wetland restoration and expansion opportunities we have to address some of our flooding challenges across Canada. And Mr. Amos already referenced some of the funding that is available federally for infrastructure development. If you could just comment on the programs as you see them right now at the federal level that provide support for wetlands management and expansion, especially in local communities, which is where I see a lot of it happening. In my community of Abbotsford in British Columbia, there are a number of different urban wetlands that were preserved and protected against urban sprawl. And today they're serving us very well in addressing flood challenges that occur from time to time. Be interested in any of your comments. And I've got one on a question to Ms. Lindsay.
I can speak from my watershed perspective. We look at it appreciating the fact that we get funding from the federal government for wetland protection and infrastructure, but from our Conservation Authority's perspective, we look at trying to protect the wetland before it gets destroyed, so leave it intact, I'll say restrict development from impacting that development by keeping it outside of the boundaries so that it can function as it was meant to be. And then, my point of view would be that it would be better left intact and not have to be reinvented after it's been impacted.
Ms. Lindsay, your organization, FPAC, represents the managed forest sector, correct?
Correct.
In all of the research that your industry has done, when it comes to forest fires and forest fire mitigation, are there some actions that you feel the federal government should take that would reduce the incidence of fires within managed forests?
I think it would build on what I had mentioned earlier. The federal government has a lot of expertise in this area, considerable expertise across the Canadian Forest Service. A lot of the forest experts and fire experts are within many of those research stations across Canada. And so I believe there is knowledge that can be shared. But I think a step in that approach are these vulnerability assessments, understanding what the specific vulnerabilities are in your region, specific to fire, and then working collaboratively with multiple levels of government to advance those mitigation and adaptation measures, and then in particular around community safety and emergency preparedness. And there's a lot of great work happening on a small scale right now. And so seeing where those opportunities are that could be further invested in and expanded is where I see the federal government taking a role.
Great, thank you. I'd like to thank our three witnesses for being here today. We realize there's so much time, more time we could have spent on this, but as we're nearing the end of the session, we thought that it is an issue that's been very important to Canadians. We're hearing a lot about it, and so we wanted to dedicate today, and we'll have a bit of time on I think Wednesday on the same topic. But thank you so much for bringing your thoughts to the table today. It's been fantastic, and this may be something that the next Parliament will be able to pick up and really move forward on. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to suspend now, switch out our witnesses, and then we'll get going again as soon as we can. back going again, and thank you to our next panel for being here for this discussion that we're having today. And go to my cheat sheet here. We have Calian Limited, Richard Moreau and Adrian Etier. Okay, welcome. And Fire Rain, Quincy Emmons and William Stewart. So welcome to you. And then the Insurance Bureau of Canada, Craig Stewart. And I believe that Fire Rain has a PowerPoint presentation, and we have the technology working right now. So I'm going to start with you for your 10-minute opening statement, and then we'll go to the other two and get over that, and then into the questions and answers that you just saw with the previous panel. So welcome, look forward to the conversation. And Fire Rain, if you would like to start, please proceed.
We would like to thank the chair, vice chairs, members of the committee for allowing us to make our presentation. I am Quincy Emmons, Fire Rain president and co-founder, and here today with me is Fire Rain board chair William Stewart, a distinguished leader within the Canadian Fire Service. Fire Rain was founded by firefighters who discovered what was really in the firefighting chemicals we were using. Fire Rain's sustainable EcoGel formula is certified 100% bio-based by the United States Department of Agriculture and by UL Environment, confirming that every ingredient comes from plants. In fact, the majority of our ingredients are grown by Canadian farmers. EcoGel is used with traditional firefighting equipment to create a viscous coating that sticks and stays on horizontal, vertical, and overhead surfaces to quickly extinguish fires. We basically make water stick. EcoGel can be applied as a fire prevention coating to protect adjacent structures from nearby fires, or ahead of advancing wildfires to protect homes and businesses. EcoGel is made entirely of plant-based ingredients, free of harmful chemicals. Under pressure, EcoGel flows like water, but once that energy is removed, it will set in place within 10 to 15 seconds, allowing the firefighter to control their fire water runoff instead of that runoff flowing into waterways or leaching into the ground. Fire Rain EcoGel quickly cools and excludes oxygen from a fire, resulting in a rapid extinguishment. Our climate is changing, and these mega fires are becoming more common. Reports from the devastating Fort McMurray wildfire indicated that embers flying ahead of the fire ignited new fires to homes and businesses, which then required response resources to be pulled from other assignments. That created a snowball-like effect where the problem kept growing until available resources were overwhelmed. Several reports indicate that carbon emissions from wildfires are significant and frequently not reported, as they negatively skew statistics. Currently, there are several long-term fire retardants approved for use in Canada for fighting wildfires. However, they are all owned by one company, just one. Warning labels on these products include comments such as, "Do not apply to green-growing vegetation," and "Do not spray in seasonal or year-round waterways." Several reports, like the one you see there, show the harmful impact the products currently being used. The fire service has known for years the impacts of AFFF foams and their linkage to cancer. Firefighting foams are being banned all over the world because they contain cancer-causing chemicals. Firefighting foams are linked to drinking water contamination in hundreds of U.S. military bases and even some Canadian towns like Mississippi Mills, Ontario. During fire operations, large volumes of water containing these chemicals are applied. These chemicals bioaccumulate, meaning they just keep building up in humans, animals, and ecosystems. These chemicals keep showing up many years after being applied. The environmental cleanup and healthcare costs, as well as potential legal implications, can be staggering, as you can see by some of the headlines. Fire Rain is growing a safer and innovative firefighting solution right here in Canada. EcoGel is currently in use in multiple municipal fire departments and industrial facilities. Fire Rain has distributors across Canada eager to introduce to new communities and new fields of use. EcoGel is proven to be more effective than firefighting foams and gels. EcoGel knocks fires down in less time while using less water. EcoGel reduces the environmental impact of a fire by controlling firewater runoff and by not adding any harmful chemicals to an already dangerous situation. The ability to stick and stay where applied is key. Fire Rain EcoGel is the first firefighting gel that is effective fighting Class B fuel fires, as well as wildfires and Class A structural fires. This gives fire departments a multi-use firefighting and fire prevention tool. This Canadian report found firefighting gels to be more effective than long-term fire retardants. Fire Rain EcoGel can be used as a chemical-free coating on forests to create fire breaks, to assist fire crews with controlled burns without harming the trees. Controlled burns are needed for healthier forests. Fire Rain EcoGel is certified safer and reports show it's more effective. We need the opportunity to prevent embers from growing fires into mega fires, to apply EcoGel to land in order to protect property from fires and harmful chemicals, to be applied directly to extinguish wildfires. We need support. Government support to increase awareness and share our story. Government support to encourage agencies to be allowed to use EcoGel. And government support to amend rules that were changed in the 1970s and the 1980s to allow the use of chemicals on wildfires. We need help to amend these rules again to allow certified 100% plant-based product to be applied instead of harmful chemicals. Rules should be based on effectiveness and environmental impact. Thank you again for this opportunity. We are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Excellent, very interesting, and look forward to some good discussions on your product. Let's go to Calian Limited next for your opening statements. I'll turn it over to you for 10 minutes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for inviting us today to present our perspective on risk and natural disaster. My name is Richard Morrow. I'm the Director of Emergency Management Solutions at Calian. My work in emergency management over the years has included risk assessment, developing plans, developing exercise and training programs to assist our first responders in their ability to manage and respond to incidents and disasters, whether they be naturally based, man-based, or large security events. The angle my colleague and I will be providing the committee today is from a perspective of science-based approach to emergency management and structures. All natural disasters generate system-based challenges, in particular with our response capacity and ability to sustain it through the response and full recovery period. Our current structures and systems are not optimized or designed to sustain increasingly long response and recovery periods caused by more frequent, more severe extreme weather events. One of the best ways to reverse the trend is to focus more resources into mitigation, adaptation, and preparedness. The start point of any appreciation of natural disaster and the hazard that are caused to community is an all-hazard risk assessment, also known as an IRA. The IRA process is a systematic way of identifying the hazards that could exist and then define the risk associated with that hazard. Unfortunately, a vast majority of communities in Canada do not have an up-to-date all-hazard risk assessment and therefore clearly comprehend the impacts of the risks that are present in their communities. In addition to the physical hazard, there are other systemic risks and impacts generated by our built environment. I'm talking here about the vulnerability of our infrastructure in the face of increasing risk impact of climate change. We are seeing an increase of the so-called 100-year events, presenting challenges to our infrastructure, most of which was built based on older risk models, which no longer reflect the current reality and future trends. Using new risk assessment models and approaches, up-to-date data and modeling tools will allow our emergency planners and decision makers at all levels to better appreciate the risk and make better informed decisions about investing in the right areas to better mitigate, prepare, and adapt to a changing environment. As an example of such successful investment in mitigation, we can turn to the Winnipeg floodway. When it was built in the 60s, cost about $60 million. It was then further improved with another investment of $600 million in the 90s. And current estimates show that as a result, up to $32 billion were saved in damages, response, and recovery costs for that investment. So a $44 return on investment. This is pretty good when we compare that the norm in the industry is for every dollar invested in mitigation and preparedness, we save, for every dollar in preparedness and mitigation, we save $6 in response and recovery. In addition to physical mitigation efforts, there are also organizational preparedness measures. That means preparing those who will eventually be called upon to respond. Depending on the scale of the disaster, the response may include resources from all levels of government and also a wide range of external partners. Improving preparedness by all stakeholders requires them to plan and invest time in advance to practice their response. This will allow time to focus on the problem quickly upon activation. At the end of the day, preparedness is about making as much uncertainty from the onset of the event and allowing people to quickly transit into dealing with the situation they're facing with. This is part of a broader need to better prepare Canadian communities to face disasters. To do so, we need to shift our emphasis currently placed on response and recovery towards mitigation, capacity, preparedness, and adaptation, while maintaining a strong response capability. Investment in mitigation and preparedness will deliver two benefits to improve community resilience. Firstly, it will reduce the impact of disasters, and secondly, it will reduce the time required to recovery. As we see an increased frequency and severity of natural disaster, we see some communities that have not fully recovered before the next disaster strikes. And we're seeing all kinds of examples this spring down the Ottawa River of communities that were barely recovering from the 2017 flood be hit again by the 2019 flood. This is not a sustainable model. Emergency management truly requires a whole of society approach, meaning all levels of governments, industry, academia, local volunteer organization, and affected residents must be involved in disaster planning, mitigation, and preparedness. Building more resilient communities will require a shift from a response and recovery focus towards investment in mitigation, preparedness, and adaptation. I will now turn over the remaining of my time to my colleague, Dr. Adrienne Etier, who is an accomplished expert in science-based risk modeling and will quickly summarize how available models and maps can be integrated to improve our capacity to prepare for and mitigate the impacts of extreme weather events, helping us make better decisions to build better for the future.
I would like to start by thanking the committee for inviting us to attend today. The visual aids shared, they weren't available in time, but they'll be available to you later, are intended to provide a sampling of existing data integration and risk communication tools based on validated data collection and or predictive risk models that can be used to improve public risk communication. My remarks today will focus on how a science-based approach to risk planning adds valuable insights to mitigation and preparedness and can inform better response plans. Building on the existing knowledge base, we can improve how disaster is measured, visualized, communicated, and understood before the disaster even strikes. To model future risk, environmental scientists and emergency planners should integrate existing science-based predictive models with GIS-based operational environmental maps, which include water quality, land use, financial liability, economic risk, watershed characteristics, dams, hydrometric data, snow survey sites, climate change, in order to forecast the risk of floods, fires, ice storms, and to complement or add to that knowledge with spatial analysis and or data trends obtained from past disasters and regional traditional knowledge. The result would be an integrated GIS-based predictive map that would use available data and knowledge on terrain and weather to simulate a range of possible outcomes based on a series of inputs. The current risk assessments generated are generally well understood by emergency planners and environmental scientists. However, the specifics of what that means to homeowners and the public is not well understood, and specifically there's a gap in translating that risk assessment into information the public can understand. The outputs of science-based risk models should be presented to the public in a way that allows people to better understand the risk. This means using integrated predictive maps that clearly show high-risk areas and how the risk will manifest. This could include showing how high the water will rise in a flood, where the fire could burn, and how long the power could be knocked out based on the distance from the main power lines. The outcome of the natural disaster should be made clear to the public to emphasize exactly how they will be affected. Any risk communication to the public is not a one-time activity, and as such, accumulated GIS-based data on things such as snowpack, land use activity, forest cover, and expected water levels should be integrated into predictive models to clearly forecast and show the public the pending or immediate risk. Once the extreme weather event has passed, the data acquired should then be used to update the model and risk profile to ensure that the model is and continues to remain credible. For emergency managers and emergency planners, scenario-based experimentation is essential to planning for a range of possible outcomes. By manipulating the variables like expected rainfalls, warmer weather.
Having an issue keeping up, and so if you want to slow it down just a little
sorry,
bit.
I was running short of time.
I want to make sure that everybody gets the full benefit of what you're saying in both languages. So,
okay.
Yeah. I was watching for Joel to see if he was giving me the signal, but yeah, back to you.
All right. So by manipulating the variables like rainfalls, warmer weather, melting snowpack faster than expected, emergency planners can visualize a range of scenarios and optimize their planning. This could include pre-positioning breakwaters and sandbags, doing rehearsals in preparation, or starting mobilization of volunteer networks in anticipation of the flooding. Manipulating variables and risk models does not guarantee perfect forecasting of the magnitude of the risk. Nothing does. However, it does allow us for a range of plausible outcomes to be presented to planners and decision makers before the crisis based on the best science we have available. There is now a cost to developing and working with the models. Data models need to be built and constantly revalidated. Data from multiple sources need to be collected. Visual analytic products need to be developed. And decision makers and planners need to be briefed on the range of possible outcomes. But much of this data is already available for these models, either collected by federal, provincial, or municipal agencies. It is a question of integration to facilitate robust risk assessments and forecasts. The cost of integrating data risk models will inevitably be lower than the cost of response and recovery. As we know from Dunrobin, just west of Ottawa, the cleanup for the flood of 2019 will also include cleanup of the last of the 2018 tornado debris. Fort McMurray is forever changed from the wildfire of 2016. Homes destroyed by fires and floods will have displaced entire communities and changed their attitudes and fabric forever. The question surrounding the social damage and social costs cannot be ignored. Neither can be measured in the same way as money and must be considered when developing risk assessment tools to improve our collective capacity for emergency management and public risk communication. Houses can be rebuilt. Communities can never be rebuilt the same way. In conclusion, using integrated science-based predictive risk models and visual GIS-based maps will permit decision makers and planners to better appreciate the potential risk to communities and individuals situated within their shared watershed. And when these results are communicated to the public, they will provide a better appreciation of the complexity and magnitude of these collective risks. The maps and models need to accomplish this, for the most part, already exist and need to be used more effectively, especially for public communication. The costs of doing so are marginal compared to the benefits this will provide in our capacity to forecast and plan for disasters. Based on extreme weather event trends that have been observed in the past few years and decades, it is crucial that we adopt a proactive and predictive approach to planning and preparedness and move away from the reactive approach that has been taken in the past.
Great, thank you. And now, Mr. Stewart, we'll go over to you for your 10 minutes from the Insurance Bureau of Canada and your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the invitation and opportunity to speak to you at the Standing Committee today on the subject of disaster mitigation and insurance. I'm Craig Stewart, Vice President of Federal Affairs at the Insurance Bureau of Canada, or IBC. We are the national trade association representing Canada's private home, car, and business insurers. 18 months ago, after the 2017 floods across eastern Canada, the Honourable Ralph Goodale, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, appointed a National Advisory Council on Flooding, largely embodied by two working groups, one dealing with the financial risk of residential flood, which I co-chair, and another one dealing with flood mapping. Our working group is comprised of representatives from 4 provinces, 4 federal departments, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, water utilities, several university think tanks, the Canadian Real Estate Association, and a number of others. We presented the result of our work to ministers responsible for emergency management last May and again in January 2019, and we have been asked by these FPT ministers to design and cost alternatives to the present ad hoc Canadian system of bailing out those in harm's way with taxpayer dollars. Our report will be released publicly within days. For context today, I would like to point out several facts. First, Canada has a climate adaptation plan as one of 4 pillars of the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change. Although we requested in 2016 that this plan deal comprehensively with flooding and made a thorough multi-partner submission to this effect, it does not do so. Secondly, Canada has a new all-hazard national emergency management plan as a result of extensive ministerial and senior official discussions over the past 3 years. This spring, we have already witnessed a much more effective response to the 2019 floods than 2017. The IBC congratulates ministers responsible for emergency management who collaborated across political lines to make this plan a reality, and Canadians are already benefiting from it. Third, my industry was founded on addressing the financial risk of fire to both individuals and communities. After 350 years, we manage it reasonably well. Almost every single person that was affected in the Fort McMurray fire had insurance and was quickly reimbursed for their loss. Flooding is another story. Fourth, flooding imperils far more Canadians than wildfire, wind, or hail. Here are some numbers. In 2013, 3,000 buildings were flooded across Calgary, Alberta. In 2016, about 2,500 buildings were destroyed in the Fort Mac wildfire. In 2017, 5,300 homes were flooded in eastern Canada, particularly in New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario. In 2018, the BC wildfires that raged all summer damaged 300 homes. In 2019, this year, 17,500 homes have been flooded this spring across eastern and central Canada. These numbers do not account for the number of people flooded every year in every province from extreme rainfall events. So yes, we do need to improve our response to wildfire. There are health issues from smoke inhalation that extend far beyond the fire zone itself. Wildfire is a growing hazard, and IBC fully supports the implementation of the Canadian Wildlands Fire Strategy and specifically the widespread implementation of Fire Smart programming. But relatively speaking, flooding affects far more Canadians than any other natural peril, and we are much further behind in our ability to help Canadians recover. Almost every single individual that suffers direct financial loss from wildfire is covered by insurance. They are not left in financial ruin. Flooding affects more people, and frankly, we do not have a coherent game plan for it. Some provinces want to stop using taxpayer dollars to repair flooded residences. Others don't. Some provinces want to move people out of harm's way through home buyouts. Others don't. Some provinces still allow for building on floodplains. We have an ad hoc, non-prioritized system of funding flood infrastructure. Beyond improvements to emergency management, our approach to flood is uncoordinated. Contrast this to the United States, where FEMA runs a sophisticated national high-risk flood insurance scheme run by the federal government, or to Great Britain, where a similar national scheme is run by private insurers. In both cases, funding for infrastructure deployment, strategic retreat options, and citizen awareness initiatives are all coordinated with the insurance program. In fact, Canada is the only G7 country without a national coordinated approach to flooding. Such an approach can only come through federal leadership. We have come a long ways the past 2 years thanks to Minister Goodale's leadership, but that leadership must be sustained. This is a complex file. This is why, as we head into a federal election, IBC is calling for a national action plan on flooding built on the lessons learned from the work of our National Advisory Council on Flooding. There are approximately 1 million homes, or 10% of all residences across the country, at high risk. In late 2015, property and casualty insurers brought overland flood insurance to the market, and we now estimate that 80% of Canadians do have access to overland flood insurance. But there are certain areas in Canada, many of them, where the risks are simply too high for the insurance market to normally support. IBC believes a national action plan on flooding should focus on 3 key pillars: educate, protect, and change. First, education. Governments in the private sector should use flood maps to educate and empower consumers to reduce their own risks. The federal government should make an immediate surge investment through Natural Resources Canada to improve the quality of terrain data, which is the foundation of all flood mapping in the public and private sector, whether you're a municipality or whether you're a private insurer. Our base terrain maps must be improved from 30 meters in resolution to at least 5 meters in resolution. For 2 straight years, the Canadian Centre of Mapping have sought funds for this purpose, but have unfortunately been declined. Then the federal government should create an authoritative online portal where consumers, businesses, realtors, mortgage lenders, and others can access flood maps and convey both the personal level of risk and what can be done to address it. International research shows that if consumers and businesses do not know their level of risk, they're not likely to do anything about it. This past January, federal, provincial, territorial ministers of emergency management underscored the urgent need for such a portal. The second pillar, protection. In short, we should move a few, then insure and protect the rest. Homes at the highest risk of repeated flooding should be relocated or elevated. If they repeatedly flood, they simply cannot be insured. We cannot do this. We cannot move 1 million homes, though, which is why strategic retreat must fit hand in glove with coordinated infrastructure upgrades such as flood defenses, and a national high-risk insurance scheme similar to what is offered in Great Britain. Allow me to spend a minute on this. Insurance is, simply put, a mechanism for risk transfer. If you are at risk of flooding or wildfire, you pay an insurer to take that risk for you in full or in part. The insurer will then reward you or your community for lowering that risk. If your community builds a fire station, or if you install smoke alarms and fire extinguishers, you are limiting the risk to the insurer, and the insurer lowers your premiums as a reward. Insurance is built on a system of incentives firmly rooted in behavioral economics. However, if you rely on taxpayer-funded bailouts, there are no incentives to lower your own risk. This is why ministers of emergency management have asked the National Advisory Council to cost and design a high-risk insurance pool, among other possible options for protecting Canadians. In such a pool, property owners would pay premiums that are as risk-based as possible, but to ensure affordability and take-up, these premiums would be capped and subsidized through a range of possible mechanisms. The pool would reward community and individual level investments in flood defenses, and these defenses should include consideration of the role that natural infrastructure plays and the means needed to financially incent the restoration or conservation of those wetlands, riparian forests, and coastal dune systems where they play a role in protecting us. You've heard quite a bit about the merits of natural infrastructure, so let me illustrate with an example. 95% of southwestern Ontario has been cleared for agricultural purposes. The highest per capita loss area in the entire country, according to our flood modeling, is Windsor, Ontario. This is not a coincidence. Financially, we need to develop the explicit mechanisms where natural infrastructure is factored into insurance schemes and communities are rewarded for restoring or conserving the forests and wetlands that protect them, such as generations ago, we incented communities to build fire stations. Finally, a national action plan on flooding should focus on changing our land use and permitting practices. We should look at the model practice of conservation authorities in Ontario or the Fraser Basin Council in BC and determine how to strengthen them and leverage such approaches in other jurisdictions. And we should implement a new climate change considerations being developed for the National Model Building Code in all jurisdictions as soon as possible. So in concluding, thank you once again, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to present to you today. As we contemplate our approaches to climate change over the next few months, Canada's property and casualty insurers have a clear message. If adapting to flood is not an explicit part of your climate plan, your plan is not relevant in terms of the single greatest climate threat facing this country. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate those opening comments. So I should have mentioned we're using the same card system as before, so 1 minute left and then wrap it up without cutting off mid-sentence. For the first 6 minute round, I have Mr. Bosio.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, witnesses for being here today. It was great testimony and once again, valuable information for this important study that we're doing, especially at this time of year with the flooding and the wildfires that are happening at the same time. Actually, I think it's appropriate that Mr. Quincy is in between the two of you because his product can help. Once you guys have identified the risk, his product can help to minimize that mitigate that risk. And on the insurance side, once he can help to minimize the impact of these wildfires. And sorry, I know it's not a joking matter, but it is. I am so proud to know that there is a company in my riding, like Fire Rain, that has created such an innovative and very valuable product. Especially given the what we're dealing with climate change, and Quincy, I know. I mean, I'm also really happy about the fact that our government really helped to provide you some valuable funds, your company, to allow you to continue to develop that product and grow your team, so that we now have this product available today. Can you give us some understanding of now some of the barriers that exist for innovative companies like yourself to be able to get this product to market and to get it to market quickly?
Our biggest problem to date is we are not a firefighting foam. So there's the box is the tests have to be done for foam, and we are a gel. So there isn't a gel test per se. We are in the process of building our own gel test with UL. Unfortunately, that has to be done in the U.S. There's no testing bodies in Canada for our product or for firefighting products. Everything goes down to the U.S.
And that's what's interesting because CSA isn't good enough for as far as a standardization. You have to get UL, which then forces you down to the U.S.
Yes.
So it delays. So, and of course, the companies you're competing against are American companies. So they don't have as much incentive to get you that UL accreditation as quickly. And so I guess so. Here we have hazardous-based toxic products that are being used, as you know, being a firefighter yourself, and Zach, your partner in crime, both being firefighters. That's what drove you to create this product. You've seen the impacts of these toxic products firsthand.
Yes, and Bill.
If I may, through to you, Mr. Bossy, certainly the impact of firefighting foams traditionally has caused numerous cancers in firefighters across the country. Depending on by province, it could be up to 15 or 18 different cancers that are recognized that was derivatives from foam. Certainly, the EcoGel takes that all that away in terms of the product that has been developed to date, and is very effective.
And I've been very fortunate to see you actually in action knock down a fire in one of your testing processes that you went through for the gel. And I was just astounded at how quickly you guys were able to knock down that fire. And the beauty of it is you knock down the fire, and typically, you use another product to knock down the fire, and you've got a toxic mess to clean up afterwards. Essentially what you guys have is compost after you've knocked down a fire. Right.
Yep. Depending on the fire. Yes. If it's a wildland fire, you just basically have compost. If it's a Class B fuel fire, you have to get it removed mechanically.
But that's because of the fuel,
but
not
because of the fuel.
Of the EcoGel product.
You're containing that spill, though.
Oh, right, yeah, because you're stopping the fuel from spreading further because you've created a barrier with the gel to be able to knock it down. And also, so I also saw some videos and other highlights of you spraying a house to protect it, or spraying something to protect it, and you've applied the flames and all the rest of it, and it's protected. After the flames are gone, you used a power washer to wash it all down, and it's just like new. And once again, no impact whatsoever on the building, no impact on the environment whatsoever.
No, it's 100% food-based ingredients, plant-based.
Same thing, if you want to create a forest barrier to a fire, and the fire is coming down, it's bearing down in a town, and you're able to circle the town with your product by like right now in we're seeing at high level in Alberta, and now Slave Lake that just was burnt down in 2011 is now under threat again. 8 years later, if you had the ability to provide enough gel in the forested areas around the town, do you feel that you would be able to mitigate the impact of the wildfire on that town?
Yes, you significantly reduce the risk without any harmful chemicals that could end up harming the trees in the future.
Yeah, once again, if anything, it would help feed the trees after the fire has gone through and the regrowth. I mean, well, really, once again, you're providing compost in the ground, and therefore it's food to the trees themselves. Once again, anything that you would like to add, that you would like to see a barrier removed that would more quickly allow this product to come to market? Anything that we could do as a government that would assist you in getting this product to market more quickly?
Encouraging the communities that need help, the fire crew leaders in the area, to let them know that this product is available.
Actually, you've even offered to provide it for free, haven't you?
Yes.
No, but he should answer that.
Right.
Seriously, go ahead, Quincy. Answer.
Really quickly. We're out of time, but okay. Thank you, Mr. Fast. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. My questions are going to be directed to Mr. Stewart. I'm very, very interested in what you had to say about disaster risk reduction, and specifically the insurance component, the high-risk insurance component you're asking the federal government to support. Can you tell us what that program would look like? Now, you've mentioned the United States. Does it actually have a high-risk disaster reduction program?
So the United States, FEMA runs what's called the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a very sophisticated program that's responsible not just for the insurance, but also for funding flood mapping. They invest hundreds of millions a year on flood mapping across the country, as well as a community incentive system. They award points to communities based upon how those communities de-risk themselves by so they essentially are providing a financial incentive to communities that lower their own risk and therefore can make insurance available to them or more affordable to their residents. It focuses very much on high-risk parts of the country, such as South Florida. The problem with the program in our analysis of it has been that it was susceptible to some major events. So right now that program is over $20 billion in debt. And it's the result of 4 major hurricanes that hit the southern U.S. all in 1 year, and so from taking a look at it, and it's run by governments, and governments aren't always the most effective way to run such programs, which is why we favor the Great Britain approach in the UK, which was just launched in 2016, in April 1st, 2016. That is a public-private partnership between insurers and governments in Great Britain. Insurers actually run it. It's transparent to the homeowner. They're just operating through their regular insurers. But behind the scenes, insurers basically collect premiums and remit them to a high insurance pool, which is ring-fenced. It's a non-profit entity. Everybody is offered affordable insurance.
Is there a cost to government under the British model?
The government backstops it to a degree, but that particular model is funded through levies applied to insurance policyholders across the country. So there's a bit of cross-subsidization from insurance policyholders, but not really from the taxpayers in Great Britain.
All right, that sounds like a model that we should be pursuing.
It's the model that ministers have asked us to take the closest look at.
All right. You had also suggested that homes that are at highest risk of being flooded, those in very clear floodplains, should be removed, and the inhabitants should be moved to other areas. I'm assuming it's the government that would be expected to cover the cost of that?
Yes. So in that case, you do have these properties that, as we've seen, unfortunately, in this region, are going to repeatedly flood. And they would drain any insurance pool that you set up, and other policyholders would essentially be subsidizing them for living there, which isn't right. So those people who probably shouldn't have been there in the first place, they're a liability that the insurance industry really does not want to take on. They should be moved through one-time programming.
Federal program?
Federal or provincial, or municipal. That's a discussion that has to happen. So this is called strategic retreat. You carefully select those communities that should be either moved or elevated. You can elevate these homes as well. Either put them on stilts or on berms, but moved out of harm's way. And then you can design this program. Even what they've done in the Netherlands is that they've created sacrificial areas where they've essentially said, okay, this whole area we're just going to move, but we're then going to divert water into it, and that's going to reduce flooding downstream and protect communities downstream. So you can do this intelligently.
In terms of the natural infrastructure that you referenced, I'm curious to know to what degree has the federal government actually supported natural infrastructure and disaster mitigation efforts, such as wetland restoration and expansion through federal infrastructure monies?
To date, with the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund run by Infrastructure Canada, natural infrastructure is eligible in that program. Unfortunately, the threshold for the program is such that it's quite high. It's $20 million is the minimum threshold. So you can't apply only for a natural infrastructure project. It's just too high and from a costing perspective, or a cost matching perspective. However, we understand that in the first tranche of applications made to that program, about 30% of those applications did have a natural infrastructure component. So the demand is essentially there. We're recommending that there be tweaks made to that program so that very innovative programs such as the ALICE program, which is basically a landowner compensation program, can be made eligible. Because much of this natural infrastructure is not on public lands, it's on private lands. So we need to figure out innovatively how do we incent people to protect that. So we're recommending tweaks to that. We're recommending that program be expanded because it's a success, but also that tweaks be made to it. And those conversations, haven't made those conversations to officials at Infrastructure Canada.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Stetsky, over to you for your 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. And again, I'm going to focus primarily on Mr. Stewart, I think. So I'm curious, the committee that was put together, you said there were 4 provinces represented on it. I'm just curious which ones they were and how they were selected to be on that committee.
So they were self-selected. British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec are all represented. But that said, the province of Alberta has been very engaged, as has the provinces of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So so those 4 provinces that I cited are the ones that are officially on there, but they're not. It's not limited. It's open to participation by others.
Okay. So if you were providing advice, and I've worked at the municipal level as a mayor, and I've been, with provincial government now federally. From the Insurance Bureau's perspective, what sort of makes you shake your head and say, why isn't the municipality doing this, and what is this? What should the provinces be doing? What should the federal government be doing? Sort of at all 3 levels to prevent, I guess, mostly, and help mitigate against, and we'll use flood as an example, or we could talk about fire as well. But what do you think we should be doing more of at all 3 levels of government?
We should be collaborating closely. That's the number one. So municipalities, as well as the provinces and federal departments, with the private sector, insurance industry, and realtors and banks, it gets to that whole of society piece that we talked about. we need to be engaging together because this is a complex problem. We should be working together to prioritize infrastructure spending. There's a lot of money out there, but it should be prioritized to the highest risk, the most problematic areas. We should be communicating and sharing flood mapping data much more than we do. As insurers, we need to do a better job of recognizing when disaster mitigation efforts are, when municipalities are investing in disaster mitigation, they should be seeing the return on investment for that in terms of availability of insurance and the pricing of that insurance accordingly. And those conversations have begun, but we frankly need there's a ways to go. We need to do a much better job of it. So I guess it comes down to we need to be collaborating.
And is the Insurance Bureau funding any proactive initiatives related to climate change? For example, would the insurance industry produce best management practices on water management or any of those kinds of initiatives? So you're putting your money into any kind of proactive things related to climate change?
Absolutely. So we have just in the last year funded a workshop and reports on how to incorporate natural infrastructure more effectively into mitigation planning. We've done that in partnership with the Intact Center at the University of Waterloo and the International Institute of Sustainable Development. We also have been, we're in partnership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on quantifying the effects of climate change on municipalities. That report is forthcoming. We also have been doing a fair amount of work with municipalities, stormwater managers represented through the Canadian Water Network on how to better incorporate climate considerations into our risk modeling. And Natural Resources Canada has been a partner in that as well. And those are that's just a sample of what we've been working on. But
yeah, I'm very happy to hear that because in the end we all have the same objective, and that's trying to keep homeowners safe, maybe for different reasons.
Yeah,
potentially, but
that's
the
absolutely
objective
right.
is certainly there. Mr. Moreau, question for you. I'm trying to figure: is your company like a private company that specializes in emergency management? Is that the contact support?
It's one of the business lines within the company, but certainly emergency management and preparedness is one of our key areas.
So from your perspective, again, going back to my time as a mayor, we all had emergency response plans in place. How do you think municipalities are doing in adapting emergency response plans to with the reality of climate change?
So the challenge is resources. Some of the communities that have more risk exposure are not necessarily the biggest or have the deepest pocket. So their ability to actually maintain their plans, procedures, and practice them is very limited and would benefit from being enabled by some funding mechanism at the provincial or federal level because it's extremely limited.
As a mayor, I used to be quite insulted because the emergency plan said the role for the mayor was to stay out of the way, not get in the way of the real work. Quick question for Fire Rain. Do you have a cost comparison? I'm trying to figure out if the product is what you say it is, why isn't it more used more often? Is it a cost thing? Is it a lack of a long-term track record, or what's the situation? So cost comparison first.
Cost comparison, we're smack dab in the middle of the firefighting foams. You can get them much cheaper or far more expensive. The biggest thing is education, teaching the firefighters this is a different product. So there's some slight different techniques.
And track record, it's too new to have a track record? Is that another concern?
We currently have 3 fire departments on board. We have 7 fire departments lined up for training. And everywhere that they are using it, they're very happy. We are implementing truck replacement strategies now for the early departments.
But we can't look back 10 years ago and say it was applied and there's absolutely no impact.
No, we've been a trial with the department north of Napanee, Stone Mills Township for almost 2 years now.
2 years now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're down to our last 3 minutes, and we're going to go over to Mr. Fisher for the final abbreviated round, and then I have a quick announcement I need to make, and then we'll be out of here.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll get right into it. Thanks, folks. Over the past 2 years, New Brunswick's St. John River has seen 200-year floods. Now, we heard Mr. Stewart speak to this. And human activity is causing Canada to warm at twice the global average, and this is a very expensive problem for New Brunswick. Last year's flooding alone cost the province of New Brunswick more than $74 million. And as for the federal government, they've spent more than, in the past 6 years, than they did in the previous 40. There's a huge cost to inaction. Mr. Stewart and New Brunswickers are suffering from that. 2 quick questions because we're running out of time. How is climate change affecting and changing the insurance industry? And do you feel that generally Canadians are aware of the costs that are covered in the event of a natural disaster?
So 3 years ago, our CEO went coast to coast in this country with the message that climate change is a clear and present danger. And that whereas there is a national conversation around mitigating future risk, most Canadians aren't connecting the dots, realizing that it's costing them right now, today. We believe that our industry saw a remarkable change effective around 2009, where the costs of climate change have escalated. Climate change attributed natural disasters have risen very, very quickly. Last year, our losses from an insured perspective were about $2 billion. To compare to throughout the 2000s, we were looking at hundreds of millions each year, not billions. The insurance industry is responding by offering new products, yes, but also by becoming increasingly vocal about the dangers that we're facing, not just here in Canada, but globally. And the fact that, yes, we need to reduce future losses by reducing emissions, but we need to realize that it's on us now. It's upon us now. And I don't think anybody in this town now, after what we witnessed in the last 3 years, could argue. So we're being very vocal about that. Your second question again?
Second question, are Canadians generally aware of what is covered in their insurance policies for natural disasters?
For natural disasters. So Canadians first are beginning to connect the dots from the work that we're seeing that there is a link between the events that they're experiencing and climate change, and that these aren't just fluke events, so that we're seeing that. Canadians are not aware enough of what's contained in their insurance policies. And we have been working on better messaging to try to encourage Canadians. A number of our members have gone out with much clear language policies to try to make sure that they understand it. I've been out continually talking about the need that every year you take a look at your policy upon renewal. You should educate yourself about what's in and what isn't, and make sure that you're actually paying for the actual risk that you face.
So the onus is on the...
We're out of time.
The onus is on both of us.
So with that, that ends our panel for today. So again, thank you to the 5 of you for being here and being part of this this discussion. Really appreciate the time and insight that you've all brought to the table today. Now, as far as the announcement, I know there was enough anticipation there. It's simply that there's a reception going on this evening at the David Suzuki Foundation, 410 Wellington, starting at 6 o'clock. And it's for World Earth Day, and Joel Godin, Lyndon Duncan, and myself are co-sponsoring that. So if anybody has a chance to come by and celebrate World Earth Day and meet some others, please come by. Okay, so and with that, we're adjourned.